Hey, I've been testing all 4 of Head's new speed line. And although I've played with the Head Speed Pro for over 10 years now, some of the frames in this lineup really surprise me. Now, you're probably going to see tons of reviews of the new Head Speed, as it's one of the most popular rackets on the market. But this review is going to be slightly different, as I'm not only going to show you the cosmetics, talk through the specs, and my thoughts about the racket, but if you've seen my recent videos, you'll know that I've recently visited Head HQ in Austria, and they actually put me through my paces on the tennis court to test these rackets using TrackMan technology. And behind me here, I've got all of the data comparing my performance with each of the rackets. Let's get into it. Wow. Now, first of all, let's talk through the cosmetics of the racket. Now, I've actually got my current Head Speed Pro here, the 2022 Auxetic version, just so that you've got a comparison of the two. And Head Speed have kept their black and white range. However, you can see on the new Speed that it's a slightly off-white color as opposed to this pure white. But what's even more obvious is this is a really matte finish as opposed to this glossy finish that the previous iteration had. And when I say a matte finish, this is so matte that you can actually feel it, but it's got this kind of velvety, rubberized texture all the way around. Now, when I was at Head headquarters, they were explaining that this paint is from a Swiss factory that actually works with Rolex, so it's a really premium feel. Now, from hearing you guys talk in the comments of my previous reviews, I think it's pretty much a 50-50 split when it comes to matte versus gloss rackets, but I want you to let me know in the comments which you prefer. When you look closer at the paintwork of the new Head Speed, you'll see in here some really nice detailing. All of the specs are now in the throat of the racket as opposed to being on the hoop. Now, to be honest with you, being on the hoop was a bit of a nightmare because you could never really see where it was. This is much more simple and it's got this nice embossed finish. Another very small detail that you might notice is the butt caps. The old model had this kind of rose gold finish, whereas the new model has the silver finish. To be honest, I think I prefer the classic silver. In fact, I did notice that on the previous model, on this rose gold finish, the black was starting to scratch off. However, in the past when I've had this silver version, this hasn't happened, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, overall, the Head Speed is pretty similar to the last few iterations. It's got its blocky black and white paint job, which I've been a fan of. I like rackets with a minimal look. Interesting that I've had really mixed reviews in the comments section when I posted a sneak peek of this over on Instagram. But to be honest, I really don't know what is not to like. Maybe the font at the bottom here. I get people's point when they say that the text is quite hard to understand when you've got the M and the P in between the Speed font. And I did have somebody else comment that they don't like this kind of soft, silky, velvety feel when they've got a single-handed backhand, as it isn't as easy to release with their spare hand. But to be honest, I can't see that being a problem. So as far as specs go, they're pretty similar to the previous lineup with a couple of changes. Just to go through them quickly, when you look at the lineup, it goes from the Team, which is the lightest racket with the biggest head. That one's 270 grams with a 105 square inch head. The nice thing they've done with this racket is they've extended the length of it and they've slightly decreased the beam width, which makes it look and feel more like the rest of the Speed lineup. The MP and the MPL, which I've got here, are pretty similar when it comes to their specs. They both have a 100 square inch head with a 16x19 string pattern, which I forgot to mention that the Team has as well, with the only real difference being their weight. The MPL is a 280 gram racket and the MP is a 300 gram racket. Now, as you know, I usually play with the Head Speed Pro, but there was a reason that Head sent me these two instead, and you'll see them in the stats later. The Pro is at the top of the Head Speed lineup and it's got the same specs as it has before. It's got an 18x20 string pattern, which makes it different to the other Head Speeds in the lineup, giving it much more control. But as opposed to other 18x20 string patterns, it's got quite an open pattern, so it doesn't limit your power and spin potential. The Speed Pro also has a 100 square inch head and is weighing in at 310 grams. But the main upgrade that all of these rackets have had is an updated version of Auxetic. It's now Auxetic 2.0, which if you've used rackets with Auxetic before, you'll know that compared to previous versions, this Auxetic technology gives your racket a much more plush feel and gives you a nice balance between control, feel and stability. And from my play testing so far with all of the Speed rackets, the Auxetic is definitely improved on the previous version. I already loved it, but this new version definitely gives a more plush feel at contact. It has a beautiful feel when you hit the ball on the sweet spot. And because these rackets have a 100 square inch head and quite an open string pattern, that sweet spot is pretty large, considering these rackets are great control rackets as well. In fact, I've always said that the head speed lineup sits pretty much bang in the middle of all of the other rackets in their head range. You've got the Prestige and the Radical that sit slightly more in the control end of the spectrum. And you've got the Boom, the Gravity and the Extreme that sit slightly more at the power end. I think this is the reason that I love these rackets, as you pretty much get a bit of everything. Control, power, spin, feel and comfort. And so if you're a player that's looking to switch rackets or get their first racket and you don't really know where to start, then I always advise demoing a speed first, as this is going to give you a really good starting point. And if you do require more control, then you can maybe look towards the Prestige or the Radical. If you want more spin, then maybe you can look at the Extreme. And if you want a bit more power, maybe the Boom or the Gravity would be good rackets for you. Oh yeah, and one more thing before we look at the stats is I tested these new speeds without a dampener. And usually I play with a dampener on my racket at all times, and to be honest, I didn't really feel that I didn't have one. So it really shows how the Auxetic 2.0 makes a real difference to the frame's dampening. So possibly the most interesting part of this review is looking at the data from my playtest in Kennelback. So yeah, this is the presentation that the product managers presented to me at the end of my playtest, and yeah, it was really in depth. So let's check it out. So before showing the stats, it's important to go through how the test worked. So I did 5 different basket drills for each racket. The first one was inside out forehands, where I was looking for hitting good shape over the net, so hitting with spin. Then I hit down the line forehands, looking for more power and penetration. Then I hit cross court backhands, followed by first serves down the tee and then second serves down the tee, so kickers. For each exercise, I hit between 12 and 15 shots and then changed rackets. The team would pass me a different racket each time in no particular order, so it was different each time. The way they normally do this test is they actually give the pro player blackout rackets, so they have no idea what frame they're using. I was actually using a normal paint job, but I tried not to look down at the racket before I did each exercise, as I wanted it to be as true as possible. So first, forehand inside out. This is where the first surprise happened. As you can see here, we've got the ball speed using each racket and the spin rate using each racket. My fastest shot recorded was 140 kilometers per hour, and that was actually with the Speed MPL, which is 280 grams. Now, the reason this surprised me, as I'm used to playing with the Head Speed Pro, and I feel that I get a pretty good amount of power with that racket. But because I was focusing more on hitting topspin on this drill, that extra weight didn't really help me out. Whereas with the MPL being super light, I was able to whip it through the air really, really quickly, hitting with a good combination of speed and spin. When you look across at the spin rate, there's no surprise that the heavier spin came with the Speed MP. The MP and the MPL both have a 16x19 string pattern, which lends itself to more spin potential. And as expected, the lowest amount of spin came from the Speed Pro. So yeah, to be honest, the biggest surprise was the MPL. I thought the Speed MP would win in both of these categories, but actually because I was hitting with so much spin with the MP, it actually slowed the ball speed down. And to be honest, the Speed team performed pretty well in both categories as well. Okay, moving on to accuracy. And as you can see here, these different rings show how close to the target I was. The Speed team, the white ring here, had the biggest range, and that was as expected. As wielding that racket around as fast as I was, you do start to lose a lot of control. Whereas the Speed MPL seemed to win in this area of accuracy. To be honest, the Speed Pro, the MP and the MPL were all pretty accurate. However, the MPL definitely performed best when I was hitting with spin. Okay, flat forehand down the line. So when I was hitting faster and more penetrating shots, the Speed MP and the Speed Pro had the best ball speed. They were very, very similar to one another. And when you think about it, that makes sense. The Speed Pro's power comes from its heavier weight, and the MP's power comes from more of an open string pattern. But you'll see when it comes to the accuracy, when hitting big and flat, the Speed Pro tends to win. When you come across here and look at spin rate, the Speed Pro is at the lowest, as expected. All of them are pretty low, to be honest, as I was aiming flat and fast. The top ball speed came from the Speed Pro at 155 kilometers per hour. Okay, so when it comes to accuracy, you can see here in the blue circle that all of my Speed Pro shots went in play and were pretty close to the target. The Speed MP and the Speed MPL had pretty good directional control, but I did spray a few of those long. Because I was swinging faster and flatter, that more open string pattern didn't give me as much control as the Speed Pro did. Compared to when I was hitting with spin, those rackets definitely performed better. Okay, so moving on to cross-court backhands. As you can see here that the ball speed is pretty similar across the board, and that's partly down to the fact that my backhand isn't a big shot. The Speed MPL was slightly slower, but when you relate that to spin rate, you can see that I had more spin when it came to the MPL. For me, when it comes to my backhand, looking at my game style, my backhand isn't much of a weapon. It's a shot that I try to place well and to create opportunities with my forehand. So speed and spin aren't the main priority, but accuracy is. And when you look at accuracy, there was a huge difference between the rackets. The Speed Pro, the blue circle here, you can see had a very good amount of control, whereas all of the other rackets, I had a lot more variance in my shots. This was because the heavier weight of the Speed Pro allowed me to swing slightly slower through the ball, gaining a lot of control, and added to that 18x20 string pattern, I was able to hit the spots pretty well. Okay, then we go on to first serve. So my biggest first serve speed was 184.4 kilometers per hour, which to be honest I was pretty happy with, as I hadn't played properly for about a year or so. When you look across the board at the average speeds, they were all pretty similar, but the Speed Pro was definitely faster than the others. And when you look at distance to target, again, the Speed Pro won. And finally, moving on to my second serve. So this was where I was trying to add more spin. Interestingly, on this one, the Speed team had the highest spin rate. That was because it has a much bigger head size of 105 square inches with that 16x19 string pattern, making it super open and easy spin potential. And because of that, the speed of my serves with the Speed team was much slower. The biggest amount of spin that I got was with the Speed MP. And interestingly, that didn't reduce my ball speed that much, as it's clearly heavier than the team and the MPL. So that spin when I was using the MP had more weight to it. And finally, when you look at the accuracy of my second serve, the MPL, the MP and the Pro were pretty hard to split. However, the team did go a little bit wayward. As a summary, you probably noticed that when I was hitting my shots flatter and faster, the Speed Pro tended to win. However, when I was hitting my spin shots, so my inside out forehand and my second serve, the MPL and the MP definitely shone through. This is what the head team had to say. The Speed MPL had the best combination of forehand inside out with the fastest speed values, good spin levels and highest accuracy. Heavier rackets, the MP and Pro, generate more power on flat forehand shots. On the backhand, all rackets work well in terms of speed and spin, but the Speed Pro shows the highest precision and lowest shot dispersion. The heavier rackets provided faster first serve speed, and on the second serve, the Speed MP and the MPL had the best combination of speed and spin, generating the heavier serves. For Ashley, the Speed Pro would be the option if he is looking for the fastest and most precise racket, and the Speed MP and MPL would be good options if he wants to add more spin to his shots. Now, clearly Head want me to add more spin to my shots, as they sent me the MPL and the MP. But it was really interesting to see these stats after I play tested, because this is exactly how I felt. In fact, after each drill, that's the exact feedback that I gave to the team.
This is the one that really surprised me. So I've never used this. This is the MPL. I'm going to see the stats from my hit later, but honestly, it felt incredible.
The one biggest surprise to me is when you look across pretty much all of the graphs, the team and the MPL held their own. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't compete with these rackets, as this was a very closed test and I was able to generate power with those lighter rackets through swinging faster. However, in a match, that's not as sustainable, as when I swung fast with those rackets, I tended to lose a lot more control. What I will say is those light rackets, although they wouldn't work for me in a competitive situation, they would definitely work well for somebody who doesn't swing as fast. So if you're a player with slower swings, or maybe a good level performance junior player, and you want to give the speed line a go, then look at the team and the MPL, as they're great rackets. And to be honest, I'm going to be looking at those lighter rackets and a different light next time. So with all of the data in mind, along with the way that I felt striking with these rackets, I'm going to be sticking with the Head Speed Pro for competition. Not that I play much, but I'm hoping to this year. And I'm probably going to stick to the MP for coaching, and I may play around with the MPL a little bit, especially when I'm working with junior players. For me, when it comes to playing matches, that more dense string pattern and heavier swing weight is going to help me when I'm dealing with faster oncoming balls, and having that pinpoint accuracy that I need when it comes to the crunch. Now, if you've seen my Head HQ tour video, then you'll know that I actually went through this whole process again using the 2024 boom range. And I'll be making another video just like this for the upcoming boom rackets. So let me know in the comments below how you think my stats will compare. As always, if you've got any questions about the rackets, let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't done so yet, I'd love it if you consider subscribing. Massive thanks again. See you soon.